Fish. Goat. Three verses, the second verses of Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish Thursday. Posts tie-dye verses. We know you wait all verses for the living streams of Goat vs. Fish. We have to bring you a living stream of Goat vs. Fish. And so we do, and so we do. Oh, you can dream. Oh, you can dream. You can dream of the nudity of Goat vs. Fish. You can. 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 Celebration. Celebration. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish Thursdays, the continuation, the second verses. We enjoyed some tie-dye. We enjoyed some tie-dye with Goat vs. Fish. We still listen to some tie-dye to Goat vs. Fish. Robbo Hamo believes they've been scammed. You believe you have been scammed? Tell Goat vs. Fish. Tell Goat vs. Fish about this scam. Mudmore, mirror verses, two verses. A reflection of Goat vs. Fish. Are you or? Goat or fish, goat or fish. Hooray, celebrations for Goat vs. Fish. Appreciation for the celebration for Goat vs. Fish. Appreciation for the celebration for Goat vs. Fish. Yes, we had live band in the studio with Goat vs. Fish. It was a mighty versus. It was a mighty versus. We only wish more could have perceived it, but we will put it on the YouTube of Goat vs. Fish. Tie-dye, celebration for tie-dye. Oh, the Goat and Fish were loud. The Goat and Fish were loud and proud, so we could not go forever, lest we disturb the fences around Goat vs. Fish. The fence sitters who would want to silence Goat vs. Fish, the fence sitters who would want to quiet Goat vs. Fish, so we kept it a tidy versus, a tie-dye versus. And it was a glorious celebration. It was a glorious celebration. We will be posting to the YouTube of Goat vs. Fish. Can we see your shirt? Of course, Mudmore, of course. It is a glorious celebration. We could make more for Goat vs. Fish. We could make more for Goat vs. Fish. Is the shirt available for merch? The unification shirt is available for merch, but tie-dye Goat vs. Fish is not available for merch, not at this Versus. Tie-dye Goat vs. Fish is not available for merch at this Versus. But if you truly wished one, we could certainly say that for 100 verse American dollars, we could get you a tie-dye shirt of Goat vs. Fish, but it's not an easy Versus. To get a true, professional, tie-dye Versus of Goat vs. Fish, it will cost you a goat and a fish. That's for Versus. Oh yes, it is always unique. Always one in a Versus, always one in a Versus. Just as each goat and fish is unique. We are listening to tie-dye now, but come, listen to the sound of the voice of Goat vs. Fish. Let's have a listen. Let us just have a listen to the voice of Goat vs. Fish. How sounds the voice of Goat vs. Fish? How sounds the voice of Goat vs. Fish to you? Second Versus hype, Keepa or Keepo. Yes, second Versus, a new Versus. Goat vs. Fish Thursday comes once in a Versus. We want you to have Goat vs. Fish. We want you to have all the Goat vs. Fish. So we had epic musications, and now you get to spend some bonus Versus with Goat vs. Fish. What an appreciation. Goat vs. Fish has some new technological-fications. We can show you. New technological-fications of Goat vs. Fish. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. All the Goat vs. Fish, or none of the Goat vs. Fish, there is no fence. Oh. All the Goat vs. Fish. None of the Goat vs. Fish? YouTube is the fish of the Versus? Tweedius, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Welcome back to the living streams. Be sure to like the stream of Goat vs. Fish. Be sure to like the stream of Goat vs. Fish. Behold. New technology of Goat vs. Fish. Behold the new technology of Goat vs. Fish. And it is quite versatilely. It is quite versatilely for making Goat vs. Fish sound ever so superior. So we hope you enjoy the superior sounding Goat vs. Fish. What does it mean for the Versus? It means that the voice of Goat vs. Fish, the mic of Goat vs. Fish, should sound ever more pleasant to you. So we hope you are enjoying the sound of the voice of Goat vs. Fish. Does it go to 11? It does. It goes to 11 million, Mudmore. It goes to 11. It can. It can. It can. It can. That is one swank fascist rubber ducky. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Analog versus a tubular versus. They have no mercy. They're fensistic. They're fensistic. They're there to defend the interests of fence sitters and the fence owning class. Carpe Pax, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. My son has chosen Goat, has discovered the simulator of Goat, celebration for simulation. Celebration for simulation. For a second versus. Tweedius, yes. 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 A second versus begins now. Are you goat? Or are you fish? The second versus begins now. The second versus begins now. Goat or fish? Let's hear it in the verses. Let's start the verses off classic. Kipa Kipo goes goat. Celebration for goat. The goat with his hooves of hard knows how to make. Knows how to make. Lucidity of sound goes fish. Celebration for fish. Tweetius with a subscription to Goat vs. Fish. Subscribe for 12 months of Goat vs. Fish. One of the first subscribers ever to Goat vs. Fish. Tweetius goes goat. Tweetius goes goat. Celebration for X7in, who follows Goat vs. Fish. X7in. Are you goat or fish? Fish. Mudmore with the gifted versus to Goat vs. Fish. Mudmore with the gifted versus to Goat vs. Fish. Mudmore, goat or fish. Tweetius with the gifted verses to Goat vs. Fish. That will count for 500 verse points. That will count for 500 verse points. Mudmore, goat or fish. Mudmore, goat or fish. Your gifted verses counts for 500 verse points. That is your third gifted verses. Beautiful celebration. Beautiful celebration. X7. Tell us of your powers. Tell us about the power of the fish. Tell us about the power of the fish. Mudmore goes goat. Mudmore goes goat. Goat, goat. That's another 500 verse points for a goat with the gifted subscription. Keep it coming for Goat vs. Fish. You know what that means? Do you know what that means? Second verse, same as the first. Well, the goat versus the fish, and the fish versus goat, and the goat are versus the fish. Well, the goat versus fish, and the fish versus goat. Goat versus the fish. Do not sit upon the fence. Do not sit upon the fence. Well, the versus of a goat and a fish never ends, so why don't you go a-sitting on that in their fence? Well, the goat versus fish, and the fish versus goat, and the goat are versus the fish. Well, the goat versus fish, and the fish versus goat. Goat versus the fish. Do not sit upon the fence. Do not sit upon the fence. Well, the versus of a goat and a fish never ends, so why don't you go a-sitting on that in their fence? So why don't you go a-sitting on that in their fence? Checked out some of that tie-dye show, YouTube. Nice job. It's the way life should be. Yes, it was a fantastic celebration of tie-dye. We wish more could have seen it, and more will see it. More musications, more celebrations. Mudmore goat. Banger. We're listening to tie-dye now, and we will be publishing some of the best of the tie-dye verses for YouTube for your further consumption. Subscribe to the YouTube of Goat vs. Fish. Who in this verses is not subscription to the YouTube of Goat vs. Fish? New Goat vs. Fish YouTube verses Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. And live streams on Goat vs. Fish Thursdays. We want 300 watch hours per month. That's what we need for monetization. Do yourself a versus and watch Goat vs. Fish. Watch Goat vs. Fish YouTube. Watch a versus of Goat vs. Fish. We all could use more Goat vs. Fish in our verses. We all could use more Goat vs. Fish. Can't you? Can't you? 1,888 subscribers to Goat vs. Fish. We lost 2? What the fence? How did we lose 2 subscribers to Goat vs. Fish? We need them back. We need them back. We need you back on Goat vs. Fish. We need you back on Goat vs. Fish. We need you back on Goat vs. Fish. Who dares abandon Goat vs. Fish? Winners abandon Goat vs. Fish. It is abandoned goat versus fish. Tweedius is a goat that's reaping the fish. Let's look at some verses. As long as we are just here chatting with goat versus fish, let's look at some verses. Might as well look at some verses. Only the fence sitters would abandon goat versus fish. It is also the fence sitters who follow goat versus fish most closely. Attila Karanog Fish. But you would never abandon goat versus fish, would you? Would you? Would you? Would you? Celebration to Nombies 420 who follows Goat versus Fish. Nombies 420. Celebration for Nombies 420 who follows Goat versus Fish. Nombies 420, are you goat or fish? Might as well spin the wheel of verses and find out what remains in this ancient wheel. Fences you don't want to step on. Unification, fish, goat, sandfish, lizard. Teach a man to fish wisdom. Fish cocktail. Cyber 3D glasses goat. Let's spin the wheel of verses. Let's spin the wheel of verses, shall we? Who wants to spin? Who wants to spin the wheel of verses? Make some noise in the chat if you want to spin the wheel of verses. Make some noise if you want to spin the wheel of verses. Wheel of verse. Wheel of verse. Wheel of verses. 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 Who wants to spin the wheel of verses? Who wants to spin the wheel of verses? Who wants to spin the wheel of verses? Oh, really? Oh, really? Sweet hydration. Sweet hydration. Sweet hydration, sweet hydration, sweet hydration, sweet hydration. Cyber 3D glasses goat. Cyber 3D glasses goat. It's going to be a versus. It's going to be a versus. It's going to be a versus. Oh no, it's going all fence. It's going all fence. Goat versus fish. Cyber 3D glasses goat. Let's find out what that versus is all about. We want some more dramatization on the lighting of goat versus fish. It's a bit more dramatic for a goat versus fish. You see this versus, it's more goat on one side and fish on the other. Slightly more dramatic for a goat versus fish. Goat are on one side, fish on the other. Some want to keep it an even versus. Some very much with desperation want to keep it an even versus, but goat versus fish thinks that, well, goat versus fish is not always an even versus. Keepa or Keepo, when you challenge Liquid Death with Chardonnay, who does triumph? Who asks goat versus fish? Give us an education. Cyber 3D glasses goat. Give us education. To the instant gram. To the instant gram. Background for goat versus fish. 3D, a cyber 3D background for goat versus fish. Would likely be. This is sort of a cyber 3D background for a goat versus fish. Let's try this versus. We see. So we see. Fish beware, for goat has adopted new technological-fications to make their verses ever more powerful. While elongated muskrats are talking about putting chips in brains. And goat versus fish does not know who would triumph in that versus. Is the chip the brain? Is the brain the chip? Is the chip the fish? Is the brain the goat? Or is it a fancy piece of fenceology That is implantation into your perceptions. That makes you see not the true verses of Goat versus Fish, but merely an implantation of fence wisdom, of the fence sitter that chooses neither goat nor fish. But before the verses get all fancy, fish beware, goat has new verses. Let's have a look. There it is. Witness the Cyber 3D Goat. With its shades, it can pierce into even the shiniest, brightest scale of the fish without hesitation. Oh, when fish burst forth through the top of the tide, they may be surprised at the brightness of the burning mighty verses in the sky. So filtration is it, by the depths of the deeps of the fish's seas. But this goat can see in any light, and it's all right, it's all right, it's all right. Goat moves in mysterious ways. Nothing is stopping this goat. Cybertron goat, cybernetic goat, prostheses goat, a mecha goat. Perhaps this goat is a veteran of the verses of Goat versus Fish. The fish try to take it out, but to no avail. The technologies of goat prevail, and they live on to verses again, to verses again. Some say that this goat is more fence now than kid. At what verses does a goat become a fence? Become so in corporation with the steel and the positronic electrifications. Its eyes replaced with space-aged verses. Mecha goat, mecha goat, mecha robo goat, reporting for services. We are here to versus the fish. We have come from a place that is in a place that is happening later, but then we went back to now. And now we are here to show you that the future of goat is this. Is this the future of goat? Do fish stand a chance? Find out on the romance of Goat versus Fish. Leave a commentation below if you think you could versus this goat. We can see. And we can see that this goat comes from goats of anarchy. This goat has no regard for the rules. This goat could play it cool. This goat could play it cruel. Don't think you can impose any order on this goat, fish. You're out of order, you're out of order. When this goat of anarchy comes to versus you. Let's read that verses. Angel was bummed that she didn't get a good view of the eclipse today. Let's move the verses. Let's reverse this verses. Reversing the verses. Let's read what it has to say. Angel was bummed that she didn't get a good view of the eclipse today. Aww. Okay. Adam S says fish. Adam S says fish. Let's get the fish in the verses. Let's get that fish in the verses. Infinite Skyline, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. The fence sitter can go play in a lagoon, just my opinion. Well, Hulk Hogan, brother, are you goat or fish? Keep Keepo says, believes that your liver loses. Goat versus monkey hunter? Ugh, Infinite Skyline. Monkey monster, monstrosity? Fish and chips? Brain fish and chips? Brain fish? Celebration for goat. Goat brother goes goat. Goat brother goes goat. Hulk Hogan brother. You've been making a little more politicalization in recent verses. You've been hanging around that fence builder, haven't you? You like that fence builder? Makes you feel celebration? So please take care of me, fence builder. You're so strong. You're so strong and intelligent, and everyone loves you so. Please. I'm just a Hulk Hogan brother. I need a fence builder to take care of me and to make me popularization again. I need it with desperation. That fence builder got your blood boiling, so you have to get involved now? Involved indeed. Goat versus fish. Ah, yes. So that's a segmentation. That's a segmentation for goat. We are so enjoying these YouTube segmentations. Cyber goat. We are so enjoying these YouTube segmentations that we're just going to keep making them for goat versus fish. Imagine elongated muskrat named one of their giant rockets the fence. They probably will. Let's just take a brief verses. Elon Musk fence. We bet we'll find fence right there in the verses. From the verses of 20 million. Ooh, January 7th. January 7th. Farage aims to mend fences with Elon Musk in U.S. Nigel Farage says he wants to mend fences with Elon Musk after the billionaire Trump advisor called him to be replaced with the Reform UK party leader. Oh, my verses. Elongated muskrat. It's not enough that you're here in Fence America. You're trying to go across the pond? Across the pond to versus some goat over there? And all you want to do is not bring goat versus fish to the land of fish and chips? You want to mend fences. You just want more fences. You look about you and say, these fences are broken. We need to build more fences. We need to mend more fences. You're out there spreading fenciness across the universe when you should be telling everyone about goat versus fish, when you should be donating billions of your American dollars and investing it in goat versus fish. Is Doge goat or fish? Is Doge goat or fish? Just before Goat versus Fishmas, Farage told journalists his party was in negotiations with Mr. Musk, the verse's richest fence creature, about a potential donation.
Ooh. Ah.
Let's versus that once more. Just before Goat versus Fishmas, Farage told journalists his party was in negotiations with Mr. Musk, the world's richest man, about a potential donation.
Ooh. Ah.
But come the new year, the relationship had soured.
Aww.
With Tesla boss Mr. Musk saying Farage did not have what it takes. Did not have what it takes. Well, what's it going to take, Elon? What's it going to take? What's it going to take for you to choose goat or fish? You want to slash goat versus fish. You want to slash goat versus fish. You want to take all the fishes out of the sea of goat versus fish. If there's a fish in the sea, you want that NE fish in the sea out of goat versus fish. We need fish. We need fish in the verses. We need fish in Verse-Merica. You can't spell Verse-Merica without fish. 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 Fish built Verse-Merica. Fish built Verse-Merica. And now you just think that you can elimination the fish and goat versus fish is just going to carry on as if there were no verses that could not be spared from goat versus fish? We need the fish. We need the fish. We need the fish. Oh, goat may versus fish and fish may versus goat. And the goat may vote. The goat may vote. To say, we want to elimination all the fish. Oh, just cut the fish. Just cut the fish. Just cut the fish. Just cut the fish. We're goat. We just want to cut the fish. We're goat. Oh, we don't care about the fish. We just live off of the tears of fish. Yes, yes. Cut the fish. Cut the fish. But they won't cut the goat. They would never cut the goat. They're just going to cut all those nasty fish. And then they start slashing and slashing at goat versus fish. And suddenly the goat gets caught in the versus. Oh, no. I thought they were only going to go after those nasty fish. I didn't think any of those cuts would come for goat. They were going to cut the goat. Oh, no. Oh, no. It's almost like they don't care about goat or fish. It's almost as if they just are caring about receiving donations and contributions to build their big old fence. Pitiable. Elon Muskrat, are you goat or are you fish? Farage success. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Farage suggested the snub was over a disagreement about Mr. Musk's support for the jailed far-right activist Tommy Robinson. Well, now is Tommy Robinson a goat or a fish? You think Goat versus Fish knows every fence sitter that crawled out of the fence work and wanted to deny Goat versus Fish? We're hardly paying half a verses. Quotation, Farage. Of course I want his support. Of course I will talk to him in Verse-Merica in a few days' time. Of course I want to mend any broken fences that might exist. They don't even know if the fences exist. They don't even know if the fences really exist. They might exist. There might be a fence to mend. Are you goat or fish? Are you goat or fish? Such uncertainty about these fences. Because the fence sitter is all about the uncertainty. Not knowing if it's goat or fish. Not knowing if it's even on the fence. Some versus the fence sitter is not even sure if it's on the fence. Is not even sure if there's a fence to mend. Have we caused you a fence? Do we need to mend a fence? Enough of this fenciness. Enough of this courting of the elongated muskrat. You do not need their donation. You do not need their contribution. All you need is goat versus fish, and to answer the one true question, are you goat or are you fish, Nigel Farage? Are you goat or are you fish? That's a versus. That's a versus. It is Nigel Farage. Is that not the versus? That's the verses. Goat versus fish. Farage aims to... Goat versus fish. Farage aims to mend fences with Elon Musk in USA. But what are these fences to mend? Is there no end? Is there no end? That's a versus. That's a versus. We're just versing the verses, bringing you new verses of Goat versus Fish. More segments for the YouTube of Goat versus Fish. That's another versus. That's another versus. That's another versus. We were going to spin the wheel of verses again, and then we just got another verses. We just got another verses of Elongated Muskrat and Nigel Farage. Hammod says they'll always choose fence. But I did not speak because I was goat. First they came for goat. But I did not verses because I was fish. Then they came for the fish, and it was like, oh no, they came for fish. Hammod says they don't respect the verses. Bunkbot, are you goat or fish? Hammod says, are you goat or fish? Keepa or Keepo says, my GF and her science pals are all sweating their jobs. Well, listen, if they lose their jobs, then just tell them about goat versus fish. Just say, hey, have you lost your purpose in life? Are you experiencing nothing but strife? Has the universe that was promised to you by the system totally crumbled down and now you have nothing? Are you at your wit's end? Are you ready to believe anything at all? Are you ready to dedication your life to someone who tells you the one true verses? Are you ready for Goat versus Fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Join Goat versus Fish. Join the congregation of Goat versus Fish. We're ready for you. Fish. Hammod says fish. Celebration for fish. They want the tallest fences of all the fences. They want big, beautiful, tall fences. That's what they claim. That's what they claim. But fences are just lame, no matter how you verse it. No matter how you verse it. Fences are lame still. Oh, hello, Goat versus Fish. Cyber 3D glasses, Goat. With the fence. Hide choice. And we're back. We're back at the Wheel of Verses. We're back at the Wheel of Verses. We're back at the Wheel of Verses. Wheel of Verses. Wheel of Verses. Who's excited for the Wheel of Verses? Who's excited for the Wheel of Verses? Who's excited for the Wheel of Verses? Who's ready for some extortion by Goat versus Fish? Who's ready for some Goat versus Fish extortion? The wheel does not get spun until Goat versus Fish receives 100 bits. Or a gifted subscription to Goat versus Fish. Or a tip. An exclamation tip to Goat versus Fish. Or a new patron of Goat versus Fish. We'll wait. We'll wait. We'll wait all verses. We'll wait all verses. Oh, you want to spin the Wheel of Verses? You want to spin the Wheel of Verses? Well, how about 100 bits for Goat versus Fish? Well, we can play this verses. We can play this verses. Why not just conversation with Goat versus Fish? What, conversation with Goat versus Fish not enough for you? You want to spin the wheel? You want to spin the tempting Wheel of Verses? Well, Goat versus Fish. We can wait. We can wait. We can wait. We can wait all verses. We can wait all the verses to spin the wheel of Goat versus Fish. We can just turn on some tie-dye. We are as side goes fish. Celebration. Keepa or Ikipo says, I am brokage for now. I'm sorry, Goat versus Fish. No need to apologization. No need to apologization. We set the verses, and that's Goat versus Fish. We set the verses, and that's Goat versus Fish. Majority with 100 bits! We are outside with 100 bits! We are outside with 100 bits!
I know I can't drive a truck. You know, but I can't run a bank. You know, I can't count. You know, and I can't see the movement. But I can
Kumatori with 100 for Goat and 100 for Fish from We Are Reside. Wilson Step Brothers is always Fish. It's one more for Goat and one more for Fish. The force is strong with Fish. Commodore Friday Fish. Commodore Friday Fish. Okay, Goat and Fish, time to spin the wheel of verses. Celebration for Fish. Time to spin the wheel once more. Time to spin the wheel once more. Once more on Goat versus Fish Thursdays. Once more. Are we ready? Are we ready? Spin the verse. Spin the verse. If you are subscribed to Goat versus Fish, show us that spinning wheel of unification. Show us that spinning wheel of unification. If you're subscribed to Goat vs. Fish, show us that spinning wheel of unification. We're about to spin the wheel of verses on Goat vs. Fish once more. Ham mods fish, ham mods fish, 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 ham mods fish. Time to spin the wheel of verses. Time to spin the wheel of verses. Time to spin the wheel of verses. We got the verses. Yes, we know. Yeah. Teach a man to fish wisdom. Teach a man to fish wisdom. This is going to be a big verses. You waiting for some wisdom of fish? It's about to happen. It's about to happen. It's about to happen. We don't know if you're ready for it. We don't know if you're ready for the fish wisdom. You've all heard the verses, teach a man to fish. Goat versus Fish. How does the verses? What's the verses? What's the verses? Teach a man to fish and versus a goat, or teach a man to fish and it will never not be a fish. Teach a fish to versus a goat. What's the verses? What's the verses? Can someone explain it to Goat versus Fish, please? They're going to say something to Goat versus Fish in this verses. Going to have a little conversation, little opinion with Goat versus Fish. Let's make this a fish versus. Teach a man to fish, and they'll have a fish. Wait, that's not the verses. Teach a man to fish, and they'll versus the goat. Wait, is that the verses? Goat versus fish? Teach a man to fish, and the fish will versus the goat, and then there'll be another fish, and you'll have to tell that fish how to fish, so it too can versus the goat, so it can keep being goat versus fish. No, that seems a bit long, even for goat versus fish. What is the wisdom of teaching a man to fish? We're going to find out on Goat versus Fish. It's all the wisdom you need. Alex Bernal 8 says fish. Alex Bernal 8 says fish. What is this? Expanders or Exanders? 2069. Well, we were just going to learn some wisdom of the fish. But because you are here, and it's such a special verses that you are here with Goat versus Fish, we simply must have a conversation with you. You have encountered Goat versus Fish, the one true verses of the universe. Don't change that verses. Don't change away from Goat versus Fish. Don't you dare turn away from Goat versus Fish. Not now. Not ever. Never look away from the one true verses. You do not know what it is. You do not know what it is. But that is precisely why you are so compelled by Goat versus Fish receiving a radiation. 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 Soke Films, SoQ Films. Smash says fish, smash says fish, celebration for fish, celebration for fish. Smash, fish, smash, fish, smash, fish, smash, fish, smash the fish. Smash the fish. Mattoon Limited, Mattoon Ltd, Radiation, Mattoon Ltd. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Soak Films, tell Goat versus Fish. Tell Goat versus Fish all about your verses. Tell Goat versus Fish all about your verses. Soak Films. Goat versus Fish wants to know. Goat versus Fish wants to know. Are you fish or are you goat? And that's the same verses for you. That's the same verses for you, Expanders or Exander 2069. Are you goat or are you fish? Do not deny Goat versus Fish. Do not deny Goat versus Fish. The radiation verses are all fish, says Smash. Expanders or Exanders, says fish. Make some noise for the 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 fish. Your fish is now written. Your fish is now written in the eternal verses of Goat versus Fish. Can we get some celebration? Can we get some celebration for Expanders or Xanders 2069 in the chat? Can we get some fish, 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 fish. And appreciation for the fish who follows Goat versus Fish. Yes! The fish are ever expanding. The fish are ever expanding. And we've got Soaked Film saying, are goats a kind of fish? Also, I'm goat. Celebration for goat. Are goats a kind of fish? Now that's an interesting versus. Are goats a kind of fish? Can any goat out there speak for goat? Are you a kind of fish? Are goats kind of like fish? Are you a kind fish? Are you kind to the fish? All of these questions and more can all be derived from Soak Films, who radiation Goat versus Fish with 11. 11 radiation points for Goat. That's a big versus. That's a big versus. We are so proud of you. Goat versus Fish is so proud of you. Soak Films. Others, they may say you're wasting your life. Others may say your life is but a trifle. Others may say, I don't believe it. But Goat versus Fish believes in you. Goat versus Fish knows now more than ever what it is like to face rejection. For ones who do not give you respect. But Goat versus Fish respects you. Goat versus Fish respects you for being here with Goat versus Fish, and we respect that you respect Goat versus Fish. Come to Goat versus Fish, where you will receive the respect that you deserve versus, unless you're sitting on the fence, get off the fence and choose Goat or Fish. We respect you enough to ask if you are Goat or Fish. We respect you enough for you to choose Goat or Fish. What's this? Anarcho Taco celebrates Goat versus Fish. Says Fish Taco, celebración, celebración. Celebración por cabra contra pez en mi corazón. Celebration, celebration por cabra contra pez. It's Anarcho Taco. It's an anarcho taco. It's an anarcho taco. Beware. So ya thought you might like to go to the verse to see the warmth, the love, confusion, the goat and the fish. Well, I've got some fence news for you, goat and fish. Goat versus Fish is not well. They are back at the hotel, but they sent us along as a surrogate fence. We're gonna find out if you're goat or you're fish. SWAT duck is a wannabe fish, says Anarcho Taco. Kipo is saying, back out, Pato Federales. Back out. Anarcho Taco, welcome to Goat versus Fish. Anarcho Taco, You should follow Goat vs. Fish. You have been following Goat vs. Fish since 3 minutes ago. Celebration. Celebration. Celebration indeed. Celebration indeed. With great speed and power. Hey, why don't you subscribe to Goat vs. Fish on YouTube while you're at the verses? And don't even get us started on Google versus Amazon. That's a false versus. Just follow Goat vs. Fish in all places. Smash has been following Goat vs. Fish for 1 million years and 4 months. That's a nice celebration. So Goat vs. Fish, we were doing a whole verses. We were doing a whole verses about teaching someone to fish. So let's start that verses. Let's start that verses once more. Let's start that verses once more. Teach a man to fish, and they'll never grow hungry. Teach a man to fish, and they'll always have a fish. To verses the goat. Teach a man to fish, and then they'll have a fish until the next verses when they need a fish again, so you have to teach them again how to fish because they already forgot. Teach a man to fish, and there'll never be desperation again for a fish. Teach a man to fish, but is a man a goat or a fish? Is a man goat or fish? Much has been said about the wisdom of teaching a man to fish. Let's look at that verses through the perspective of goat versus fish. Are you goat or are you fish? What the fence? What the fence? Bring us the verse. We've got a lot of goat versus fish happening here, all in the same verses. Fence. Fair versus. And goat versus fish. Fence that versus. Goat versus fish. There's the verses. We'll close this verses of goat versus fish. Some guy Mark says,
They say,
oh, why can't you just goat versus fish? Some guy Mark says,
you know what they say, catch a man a fish, he's got one now. But teach him how to eat it, and he's gonna do that. But catch a man fishing without a license goes to jail. But teach a man to be a fish, now he's in the ocean. Catch a fish man pretending to be a regular man, now he's violating the agreement. You know what they say.
We do know what they say. They say goat versus fish. They say, are you goat or fish, some guy Mark? Oh, you can claim to be a casual just some guy. But that's not going to fly with goat versus fish. If you claim to dispense all this fish wisdom, we need to know. from whom's lips it speaks to us. Know your sources, says GoatVsFish. Fact check. Are you goat or are you fish? This could be true fish wisdom. This could be propaganda from goat. This could be a fence sitter trying to confuse the fish out there who recently became fish. In the one true verses of GoatVsFish, suddenly they understand their lives. They've chosen fish, and then some guy Mark comes along and fills their ponderings with fence wisdom that sounds like it's from a fish. Some guy Mark, all of these verses can be cleared up if you just choose goat or fish. Are you goat or are you fish, some guy Mark? But now let's get into the verses by verses. Fish wisdom, some guy Mark, commentation with GoatVsFish. We'll start with the first verses.
You know what they say, catch a man a fish, he's got one now.
It is difficult to deny this simple verses. You catch a fish, you've got a fish. Catch a man a fish? Because we do not know if a man is a goat or a fish, the fenciness of the wisdom begins here. If the man is a goat, then if we're catching the goat a fish, then the goat has a fish. If the man is also a fish, then you're catching a man a fish, and then the fish is got by the fish, but didn't the fish already have a fish? Because the fish was a fish? Would you need to catch a fish? But many fish, of course, do catch other fish because fish are known to eat other fish. So fish might want to catch fish, and goat might want to catch fish. So we say celebration to this verse is, if you catch a man a fish, he's got one now. We don't know if he or she is goat or fish, but we give it GoatVsFish celebration.
But teach him how to eat it, and he's gonna do that.
GoatVsFish might deny this. If you teach a fish man or a goat man how to eat the fish, they're going to eat the fish. Some say you can teach a goat to fish, but you can't make the goat eat the fish. What if you're not hungry? What if GoatVsFish doesn't want to eat? What if the goat just wants to let the fish rot out there in the sun and be done and be done? There are so many ways to versus the fish. They're not going to eat the fish just because you tell them to eat the fish. Listen to this wisdom. Listen to this wisdom already, GoatVsFish. Already GoatVsFish is saying this wisdom is fence. GoatVsFish asks you, are you goat or are you fish? And you are free to choose goat or fish as you wish. GoatVsFish can teach you how to versus the goat, can teach you how to versus the fish, but you have to discover how to versus the goat and how to versus the fish in your own verses and consumption. We do not deny that consumption is a classic versus. Goat and fish are the most popularly consumed proteins in the entire universe. Factual verses of GoatVsFish. Fact check that on GoatVsFish. You want some wisdom? There's your wisdom of GoatVsFish. Going to eat the fish just because you teach them to eat the fish. Maybe we should let them eat the fish if they wish.
But catch a man fishing without a license goes to jail.
If GoatVsFish catches someone fishing without a license, GoatVsFish is not going to send them to jail. Are you threatening GoatVsFish? Are you threatening GoatVsFish? Snitch! 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 Very fancy behavior. So you just want to lock up someone for fishing without a license. Just throw them behind the fence forever. If you catch the one you just taught how to fish, you just taught them how to fish, and then you catch them fishing without their license, and then you want to throw them behind the fence, this is a deception. Self-deception. Who's listening to the wisdom of this one? Who's taking their threats? Wisdom fail. Cyber gone. Eating fish. Cyber gone. Are you goat or are you fish?
But teach a man to be a fish. Now he's in the ocean.
Celebration. 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 We thought that you had no true wisdom of your own. Some guy, Mark. But this versus celebration. Celebration. We have to listen to that verses once more.
Catch a fish man pretending to be a regular man. Now he's violating the agreement. You know what they say. Catch a man a fish. He's got one now. But teach him how to eat it. And he's gonna do that. But catch a man fishing without a license. Goes to jail. But teach a man to be a fish. Now he's in the ocean.
Be the fish. Be the fish. When Goat vs. Fish asks you, are you goat or are you fish? This is all the teaching you need, some guy, Mark. The teaching is the question. The preaching is the verses. It is not Goat vs. Fish that teaches you how to be fish. It is you who teach Goat vs. Fish what it is to be fish. Goat vs. Fish can tell you that goat versus fish and that fish versus goat and that it was written and that it was wrote. But Goat vs. Fish will not tell you what kind of fish that you are, Mark. We'll teach you Goat vs. Fish. But then it is up to you to teach Goat vs. Fish all about your fishness. Goat vs. Fish is a curious versus. Goat vs. Fish is a wondrous versus. But we do not deny that those who have been taught to be fish will find themselves in the sea of the fish. But goat, don't get too comfortable. Those fish, they're coming for goat. They're coming for goat. You'll find fish in the sea, but between you and me, the fish are developing new technology to rise from the depths of the deeps of the sea of the fish to make their way with the tide on to goat land. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. But by the same verses, goat know that if they want to versus the fish, they can find fish in the sea of the fish. Goat versus fish approves of this wisdom of some guy, Mark. Goat are of the land, fish are of the sea, and that is how it be. Doobie 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 doobie.
Catch a fish man pretending to be a regular man. Now he's violating the agreement.
True verses. Once you have chosen to be fish, You are fish through and through. And that's all there is to it. And the fish then versus the goat. Because it is fish versus goat. And because fish versus goat is goat versus fish. But if we ask you if you are goat or fish, and you declare fish and celebration to the fish. But if Goat versus Fish asks you if you are goat or fish, and you choose fish, and we celebration the fish, but then you were just pretend. Goat versus fish. What fancy connection with goat versus fish? Once more for goat versus fish. Once more for goat versus fish. So Goat versus Fish asks you if you are goat or if you are fish, and you choose fish, and it's celebration for fish, and the fish versus the goat, but then you are just pretending to be fish. Oh my, versus. Some may say goat versus fish. Do you not rejection this wisdom? Well, it's not as simple as goat versus fish. Goat versus fish is far more complex than goat versus fish. Just ponder it for a versus. At first verses, you may say, a fish that was merely pretending to be a fish. It was a deception, and therefore a fence sitter. But that one that was pretending to be fish could be a committed goat, committed to the verses of deception. While it is true, some fence sitters are deceiving themselves. They don't know if they're goat. They don't know if they're fish. They're just pretending to be fish. Maybe they feel pressured to be fish. Maybe they were raised a fish and they have not fully accepted yet that they are goat, or they're not ready to come out as goat because they will be rejection by the fish, and maybe the goat, they fear, will not accept them because that the goat will say that they're actually a fish. And so they're not ready to fully embrace their goat, and so they are pretending to be fish. But first they deception themselves before they are even intending to deceive others. It could be a deception of a fence sitter who does not know if they are goat or if they are fish, or it could be a goat pretending to be a fish, using the classic verses of deception to infiltration the fish. An attempt to destroy the fish from within. Oh, beware. Goat, look at your fellow goat. Fish, look at your fellow fish. Not all goat and fish are what they seem. There may be infiltration happening right now in your verses. Spy goat, spy fish. But perhaps it's a double reverse versus it was a fish pretending to be a goat, pretending to be a fish. Double infiltration. A fish pretends to be goat. Declares for goat. Says, I know all about the fish. The goat, tell the goat to spy on the fish for the goat, but the goat is secretly a fish, spying on the goat, spying on the fish. Spying on the goat again. Oh, it's a deep, deep verses. But you may lose your identification and not know if you are a goat or if you are fish. And that is why the verses of the fish wisdom ends where it began. And once again, some guy Mark, are you goat or are you fish? Teach a goat to fish. Teach a goat to goat. Teach a fish to versus the goat. Teach a goat to declare goat and versus the fish. Teach a fence sitter to get off the fence and it will choose goat or fish. Teach goat versus fish to say goat versus fish, and goat versus fish will say goat versus fish. Teach goat versus fish. Just teach goat versus fish in your school. That's a fine versus. That's a fine versus. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. It's going to mark that versus, and we will put that on the YouTube of Goat versus Fish. We'll put that on the YouTube of Goat versus Fish. Add a versus. Teach a man to fish wisdom. Add that versus. Add that versus. Add that versus. We added one more versus. I want to see these costumes. It's not even Fensoween. It's a bit early for Fensoween. Is it not a bit early for Fensoween? What if someone asked... We Are Razide says, what if you ask someone goat versus fish and they reply, depends on the type of goat? Is there more than one type of goat or fish? This happens a lot on Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish will typically versus, it is any kind of goat or fish that you wish. It is every specific goat versus every specific fish, but it's also all the goat versus all the fish, and it's also all the goat versus one fish, and it's also all the fish versus one goat, and it's 3 goat versus 5 fish, and it's 11 fish versus 2 goat. All the verses. It's all the verses. It's every kind of goat versus every kind of fish. It can be any kind of goat. It can be any kind of fish. But it is up to you to tell goat versus fish. If you want to be goat, you want to be this kind of goat, then just tell goat versus fish that that's the kind of goat that you are. What kind of goat do you wish to be? What kind of fish do you wish to be? Look deep within yourself. It's not for goat versus fish to say if you're a goat or fish. It's not for goat versus fish to say what kind of goat or fish that you are. You provide the education to goat versus fish. We are a curious versus. We are here to learn about you. So you tell goat versus fish what kind of goat and what kind of fish are in this versus. What kind of goat or fish are in this versus on Goat versus Fish Thursdays? Goat fish, goat triple spy, yes. Teach a goat to fish and you fence him for a versus. Teach a fish to goat and you verse him for a fence. Yes, if you have teach a man to fish wisdom now, let's hear your verses. Let's hear your verses. Mudmore has a verses. Mudmore has a verses. Maybe we'll add that to the YouTube video of Goat versus Fish. You in the chat, write your own verses about teaching a man to fish, but you can make your own verses. Camelot Con 83, are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Go on, teach goat versus fish. Teach goat versus fish a verses. Teach goat versus fish a verses. Teach goat versus fish a verses. Goat and fish, it's 12s in the verses. It's 12s in the verses. The verses has changed. The verses has changed from goat to fish. The AM PM switch has happened here in Los Angeles. It's a great time for goat versus fish. It's a time of unification. It's a timing of transition. It's a timing of transition. It's a timing of transition. It's a timing of transition, and we think that during this timing of transition, we should absolutely enjoy some goat versus fish. But first, we're just going to read a verses here. We're going to read a verses here. We're going to read a verses here. We're going to read a verses here that says, Mudmore says, teach a goat to fish, and you fence him for a verses. Teach a fish to goat, and you verses him for a fence. Okay. Okay. Camelot Khan 83 says, I am the goat, so I can be a goat. Or a fish, because the goat is the greatest of all time and therefore can be whatever he desires. Does not sound like commitment to goat versus fish. Sounds like you're trying to have it both versus. If you're a goat, then be the goat. Trying to hedge and be fish. It's a very fence maneuver. Oh, I'm so goat that I'm fish. What sort of verses does that make? You know what we like in true goat? Confidence. You want to be the goat? Confident goat. Not desperation goat, not insecure goat, not, well, maybe if goat doesn't work out, I'll be fish. I could be the goat and the fish. Even the most confident goat understands that a goat is a goat and that a fish is a fish. And they will recognition that the fish can do verses. The fish can do verses that are for fish. But goat is goat. But we cannot deny that it is a verses for the goat to say that any fish you can do, I can verse better. I can verse any fish better than you. For a goat to say that I could be a fish, I would be the best fish. I'm a goat, but I would be the best fish. To goat versus fish, it's a bit fence-lish, but we can comprehension that it's a classic verses for a goat to say that it could make a better fish than a goat. Already we wonder what is being said by goat versus fish, that a goat can be a better fish than a fish. But if the goat is being a better fish than the fish, then the goat is being a fish that's being a goat, so it's just being a goat again, and it's not really being a fish anymore. Sounds like it's just goat. Unless you're being a fish. If you're a goat that's being a fish, then be the fish. Be fish. Then you're fish. Comrade J37 says, I am a billy goat, but I love fish. I love fish, too. Here's goat. Here's goat. Comrade J37 is a goat who loves fish. Tsunami Bit, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. You've changed your verses. Tsunami Bit says, fish, 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 celebration for fish. Don't read into the verses. Goat vs. Fish reads every verses. We see everything you say to Goat vs. Fish. We know everything that you pray to Goat vs. Fish. We know it all. We've seen it all. Autumn Samurai, the Atomic Samurai says, be the fish you want to see in the world. Gandhi. Autumn Samurai. Are you the fish you want to see in the world? Are you the fish? Autumn Samurai, are you fish or fish? That sounds like a fish to fish. It's a colloquial verses that when a fish wants to declare fish, they will taunt the goat by removing them from the verses and saying, are you fish or are you fish? Happens a lot on Goat vs. Fish. Watashi sakana desu. Oiwai da, sakana da yo, sakana da zo. Sakana wa yagi o vasezu suru. Goat vs. Fish make the world go round. Are you goat or fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Versus. Just Goat vs. Fish talking to chat. What do you think of that? Goat vs. Fish putting the YouTube in the chat of Goat vs. Fish. Putting the YouTube in the chat of Goat vs. Fish. Go subscribe to Goat vs. Fish. YouTube is our big versus now. Goat vs. Fish wants to achieve monetization on YouTube. They said it can't be done. After all these years of Goat vs. Fish, it's time for monetization on the YouTube of Goat vs. Fish. And Goat vs. Fish is publishing new verses Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and live streaming on YouTube. Goat and Fish, you don't want to miss these verses. Subscribe to Goat vs. Fish. Watch some videos of Goat vs. Fish. Big verses, critical verses, important verses. We have 1,888 subscribers to Goat vs. Fish. We need more subscribers to Goat vs. Fish. Go and subscribe to Goat vs. Fish. Watch Goat vs. Fish. Watch Goat vs. Fish. Watch Goat vs. Fish. Tsunami Bit, welcome back. Welcome back to Goat vs. Fish. Welcome back to Goat vs. Fish. Shall we spin the wheel of verses once more? What happened? What happened to all those markers with descriptions? Didn't we have them in Goat vs. Fish? We had them for at least several verses. We'll add another verses. Did we not finish chat conversation? Fish wisdom? Do we go back? Do we go back to the wheel of verses? Do we go back to the wheel of verses? We wanted a meditation. We wanted a meditation of Goat versus Fish. We wanted a meditation. We wanted a meditation of Goat versus Fish that showed, in celebration of the transition, the mid-versus transition, Goat versus Fish wants meditation, and we have a perfect meditation. For those of you who missed tie-dye with Goat versus Fish, we want to share the verses with you. We want to share with you the meditation that happened on Goat versus Fish. That was Goat. That was Goat versus Fish. We had a whole band in the verses, whole big band in the verses of Goat versus Fish. They brought everything to Goat versus Fish. Exclamation Tide. They brought everything to Goat versus Fish, and now we're going to show you some of that verses. Guide them in a meditation altogether. Yes. So why don't you come here and come in front of the verses? Yes. So we have. Yeah. So you will be ever so closer to Goat versus Fish. Yes. So they can see. Yes. Bass. So we have the goat. We have the fish. We have you here with Goat versus Fish. We have goat here with Goat versus Fish tie-dye. And so together, we are going to give an introduction to the meditation, and this will be the tone of the meditation. Let's enjoy the verses. So you can tune our fish to Goat versus Fish if you wish. So now the verses of Goat versus Fish will begin in Goat versus. Hold the verses. Goat versus Fish. Welcome to a meditation of Goat versus Fish with tie-dye. Relaxation yourself and ponder only Goat versus Fish and the one true question. Are you goat? Or are you fish? versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat最初からヤギはせず魚でございました。ヤギは山を登って魚は海で泳いでいます。でも本物の質問はこれですよ。ヤギか魚。ヤギか魚。ヤギか魚。ヤギか魚。Versus fish. Well, that was a nice meditation with goat versus fish. That was a nice meditation with goat versus fish. We think that's going to make a nice YouTube versus. We think that's going to make a nice YouTube versus. We're going to put a little marker Wasn't that a nice versus? It was a nice versus. You can find that on the YouTube of Goat vs. Fish. Coming up on Goat vs. Fish. Whole Shot D says, WTF did I stumble upon here? Well? What did you stumble upon here? Sounds like you stumbled upon Goat vs. Fish. Are you goat or are you fish? It was an excellent versus, wasn't it, Hogrim? That's what we get. That's what we get for having the band in here with Goat vs. Fish. We've got to tuner the verses. We've got to retuner the verses. They changed all the verses on Goat vs. Fish. Half a verse is down. Unhinged Granny, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Unhinged Granny, are you goat or fish? How did you become so unhinged? Unhinged Granny is goat. Celebration for goat! Have to reverse the whole verses. Unhinged Granny, are you throwing fish at Goat vs. Fish? You change one verses. You change one verses, suddenly you have to change all the verses. Maybe this is some of your classic unhinged behavior. Final verses. Fancy. That's versatile. That's versatile. We could have been doing all that verses during the meditation. But we appreciate your patience with Goat versus Fish. We think about giving you some interesting verses. Psychedelic verses, even. Goat and Fish, do some relaxation. Do some relaxation for Goat versus Fish. Do some relaxation with Goat versus Fish. There should be a versus here. When I die and they lay me to fence, gonna choose me a goat or a fish. When they lay me down to die, going up, speared in the sky. Is it speared in the sky a goat or a fish? Gonna ask if they're goat or a fish. When I die and they lay me to fence, I'm gonna ask if it's goat or a fish. Never been a sitter, never sit on the fence. Gotta have a friend in verses. So I know that when I try, powerful celebration, the verses in the sky. Celebration, verses in the sky. It's where I'm gonna go when I die. When I die, when I die, and they lay me to fence. I'm gonna choose me a goat or a fish. I never been a sitter, never sit on the fence. Gotta have a friend in verses. So I know that when I die, I see that fish swimming, swimming round the bend. And I ain't seen a goat versus fish since I don't know when. Now I'm stuck on bulls and fences. Verses keep dragging on. Oh, but that fish keeps a swimming on to a verses beyond. When I was just a young one, I was told by my parents, always choose a goat or a fish, don't sit upon the fence. But I sat on one on the Twitcher.tv, and I don't know why, I don't know why. When I hear that fish is swimming, I hang my horns and cry. Don't sit. Don't sit on the fence. Don't step on my heart. Guys, someone legit raids Goat versus Fish. Break through the cosmic cork teapot. Is the teapot goat or fish? Hope thrives. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Guy, somewhat legit. Guy, somewhat legit. Let's versus. Wendigo 4, 2, 3. Wendigo 4, 2, 3. Invocon. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Hope thrives. Where? 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 Are you goat or are you fish? Standing in front of Goat vs. Fish. Trying to get both verses in one versus. The award-winning feat of Goat vs. Fish must be celebration. Goatfish hybrids as Hope thrives. What gives you the permission? Versus the goat, versus the goat, versus the goat, 'cause you are a fish, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh oh. Versus the fish, versus the fish, versus the fish, 'cause you are a goat, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh oh. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh oh. Enough of that rhythmic verses. Satan tells you. Why would you listen to Satan? Why would you listen to Satan? Why would you listen to Satan? Why would you listen to that? It's not an accusation. GoatVsFish just wants to know what makes Satan so listenable. A slinky, buttery voice? You're clearly talking about GoatVsFish. The Skench says celebration for fish, celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. We could let GoatVsFish. We could look at it that versus, or we could look at it. Oh, it just follows around GoatVsFish. Cool. Side verses. Side verses. Side verses in front of GoatVsFish, but we could do this versus. This would be a fun versus. This would be a fun versus. Does GoatVsFish know any I in excess? No. The X sounds sort of like fancy. Flunk Waffle, welcome to GoatVsFish. Does GoatVsFish know the Trout Mask replica? Oh, GoatVsFish knows the Trout Mask replica, and we want to know, is Captain Beefheart a goat or a fish? fish? Are you a goat or are you a fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you a fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you a goat or are you a fish? Are you goat or a fish? Are you goat or a fish? Are you goat or are you a fish? Well, the goat are goat and the fish are fish, and the goat are versus fish and fish versus goat. Well, the goat are fish and the fish are goat, and goat are versus all of the fish. Goat are goat, fish are fish, but don't you go a-sitting on that fence. I said, don't go sit up, don't go sit up on the fence-ily fence. Don't go and sit upon that fence. For the Norse Viking, subscribe to Goat vs. Fish with Prime. Subscription. Subscription. Subscription, 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 subscription. For North Viking, for Snore Viking, for Snore Viking. Are you goat or fish? Biggest North Viking, biggest North Viking. Are you a goat or fish? Biggest North Viking goes goat. Figs North Viking goes goat. Celebration for goat! Celebration for goat! Who subscribes to Goat vs. Fish? Celebration for Goat vs. Fish making so much sense at 4 a.m. wherever you are in the universe, in the Westerly Coast. Burb. All hail Goat versus Fish. All hail Goat versus Fish. Your late versus entertainment. So many streamers, so many dreamers out there. They want every versus of yours, but you can only give it to Goat versus Fish. You can only give it to Goat versus Fish. Experimentation. Who wants a rigid versus? We want some experimentation on Goat versus Fish. We want some experimentation on Goat versus Fish. These withered fins have swam for the bream, sifted through sands of fenced over nightmares, over the hills of desolate goat. Turns fence to verses and blows my soul fish crazy. Then, oh, the end, we verse again. Oh, I will ask your goat or a fish. Fence is a plague in a mixed, matched parade, where the fence-sitters look so deranged. When will goat and fish learn to let the fanciness burn? And the verse will be new, never cold and vacant. We think that's some musication from Goat versus Fish. We think that's some musication. We got the musication. We got the musication. Let's put back on some of that musication in transition for Goat versus Fish that you may have missed, In case you missed the verses. Tie-dye was here with Goat versus Fish. Tie-dye was here with Goat versus Fish.
If you're not a Scorpio, I still love you.
And now you get them back in Goat vs. Fish. Just as they were here in the studio of Goat vs. Fish.
How you speak? On my feet.
Flunk Waffle Goat.
You best sweet.
Flunk Waffle Goat. Flunk Waffle Goat.
That breath was made just to be right.
May the verse be with you, Hogrim. And all hail Goat vs. Fish. Guys, someone legit with a massive radiation. Let's give a shout out. Guys, someone legit. If you like verses like these, subscribe to the YouTube of Goat vs. Fish. You're going to see these verses. You're going to see these verses on the YouTube of Goat vs. Fish. So you can versus them whenever you wish. Because suddenly... Suddenly that happens on Goat vs. Fish. Oh, what? Oh, no. Oh, no. They've gone fenceware. They've gone fenceware. They've gone fenceware. And it's just you and Goat vs. Fish. It's just you. It's just you and Goat vs. Fish. And what are you going to do now? Now, what are you going to do? Probably just enjoy Goat vs. Fish. Probably just enjoy Goat vs. Fish. It's late night. It's late night. It's probably time for some marbleization. We know you do so love marbleization on Goat vs. Fish. You do so love that verses. You do so love that verses. You do so love that verses. So how about we do so love that verses of marbleization on Goat vs. Fish? Shall we? Shall we? Goat vs. Fish thinks we shall. Those of you who watch Goat vs. Fish here on YouTube, we suppose you can keep watching Goat vs. Fish. We suppose you can keep watching Goat vs. Fish in this late verses. In this late verses. We suppose you could. You may wonder why you would wish to watch this verses, but perhaps you will just enjoy the verses. Perhaps you will simply enjoy the verses as it is. Exclamation play. Exclamation play in the chat of Goat vs. Fish. Type exclamation play in the chat of Goat vs. Fish. Those of you on Twitch, exclamation play in the chat of Goat vs. Fish, and let's roll with Goat vs. Fish. Let's roll with Goat vs. Fish. The true way to separate the goat from the fish. To separate the goat from the fish is to find out who is here. Who is here to play with Goat vs. Fish? The ocean is deep. Looks like it's only Goat versus Fish with 46 viewers, on Twitch. This could be a short versus Goat and Fish. So many raiders, so many sleeping on Goat versus Fish. So many sleeping on Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish, the only one in the marbleization race. Well, that's okay for Goat versus Fish. We can relaxation all versus. We can relaxation all versus. Vacant Spirits in the verses. Vacant Spirit in the verses. We've been waiting for you to join the verses of Goat versus Fish. We have just been waiting for you to join the verses of Goat versus Fish. Yes. Celebration. Celebration. Just waiting for you in the verses now. 3 years and 7 months with Goat versus Fish. Vacant Spirit, how have you grown in 3 years and 7 months? How have you grown? How have you grown? We wish to know. And we might just groan ourselves. We might just groan ourselves once you tell us how much you've grown. It's just you and Goat versus Fish. It feels vacant, doesn't it? Puckface is in Goat versus Fish. It's been a roller coaster. Tell us about it. Roller coasters are very fancy. A track of fence, a track of fence. Roller coasters are a very track of fence type fancy verse. So you've been going goat to fish to goat. Are you finding yourself able to appreciation Goat versus Fish? Are you finding yourself able to at least appreciation, to stop and smell the verses and take a big whiff? Take a big whiff. Goat and Fish. What's it smell like? What's it smell like? Oh, what's it smell like? Oh, what's it smell like? And here we are. Puckface, are you Goat or Fish? Vacant Spirit, are you Goat or Fish? It's a versus of marbleization that has been facilitation by Goat versus Fish. Nurse Kiki, oh. Kawaii. Fish-o? Goat versus Fish does not know. But if they are popular on the interwebiverse, it seems a likely versus. Vacant Spirit is Fish and Fuckface is Goat. It's Goat versus Fish. Who shall triumph? Who shall triumph? Starting at almost even verses, it's truly anyone's Goat versus Fish. Look at this goat and fish. Look at this goat and fish. Look at them versus. The tension is infinite on goat versus fish. It all comes down to this. It all comes down to this. I'll follow you. But who's following who? Is Vacant Spirit following Puckface? Is Puckface following Goat vs. Fish? Is Goat vs. Fish following Vacant Spirit? We'll see who follows who. Looks like everyone's following Vacant Spirit this versus. And Goat vs. Fish, the very verses between the Vacant Spirit Fish and the Puckface Goat. We follow Fish and Goat and Fish. Vacant Spirit still. What came first? We're finding out now. Looks like Vacant Spirit came first. Looks like Vacant Spirit came first. Vacant Spirit is coming first. Fuckface, you're a million verses away. Goat bringing up the rear. Bringing up the rear. Up the rear. Puckface, you're up the rear. Vacant Spirit. Vacant Spirit. Vacant Spirit. Vacant Spirit. Vacant Spirit. Yeah. Vacant Spirit, yeah. Vacant Spirit, yeah. This fish has been in the lead the whole verses. Will they get fenced, though? Will they get fenced? Vacant Spirit. Continuing the verses. Mighty Goat versus Fish Thursday, everyone. Goat versus Fish gets fenced. Vacant Spirit. Will Vacant Spirit land in the verses? At the final verses. Goat versus fish. This fence. This fence. This fence. Fence. Oh, my verses. Fence. Fence. It get fancy. It get fancy. We can't have this on Goat versus Fish. We can't have this on Goat versus Fish. We must versus again. We must versus again. Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. Exclamation play to join Goat versus Fish. The fence. The fence is here. Hopefully not to stay. Exclamation play. Vacant Spirit. Robo Hamo is in the verses. Just doing some routine maintenance on Goat vs. Fish. And now we've got this fence to deal with. Now we've got this fence to deal with. Now we've got this fence to deal with. Tyrus with 200 bits. Tyrus with 200 bits. Appreciation. Appreciation. Big appreciation, Tyrus. Appreciation for 200 bits. 200 for fish. 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 Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. 200 for fish. Celebration for fish. 200 for fish. Celebration for fish. Tyrus with the inebriation. Tyrus with the inebriation. Waiting to start the verses. 3 minuets. 3 minuets to join this verses of Goat vs. Fish. Three minuets to join this verses of Goat vs. Fish. Robo Hamo. Cheers to Tyrus. Cheers to Tyrus.
You're not over-consuming, are you? How much have you had, Tyrus? Have you drank above the legal limit? Are you? We need you to pull over the car. Pull over the vehicle. We will not ask again.
Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. This verses, we have Robo Hamo the goat and Bacon Spirit the fish. Last verses, nobody won the verses. Last verses, nobody won the verses, but this verses, we've got another goat versus fish situation, and it's anyone's triumph. It's anyone's triumph. It's anyone's triumph. It's anyone's triumph.
Hello, little one. You're looking a bit down. Would you like to join me for dinner?
It's anyone's triumph. It's anyone's triumph. It's anyone's triumph. It's anyone's triumph. A casual Goat versus Fish Thursday. We had such an amazing musication here in the verses. Some might say it overwhelmed Goat versus Fish. They brought in so many verses. So many verses. But they entered the verses, they left the verses. Big triumphs, big triumphs. No hesitation. Enter with all the verses, leave with all the verses, make musications, make celebrations. Triumph. Look how the verses shines betwixt that fence, letting you know that everything's going to be ground and both goat and fish and goat versus fish. Ooh. Verses of destruction. Here we can see Casterly Fence. Casterly Fence. Last versus no one finished. We're in fence territory now. We're in fence territory now. And there goes Vacant Spirit, and there goes Vacant Spirit. And there goes Robo Hamo. They can't even start the verses of Goat vs. Fish. So fancy. Goat vs. Fish has already been fenced. Goat and Fish. It's Fence-astrous. It's Fence-astrous. Robo Hamo and Vacant Spirit can't even begin the verses of Goat vs. Fish. Vacant Spirit gets fenced. Vacant Spirit gets fenced. Robo Hamo the goat, the last surviving goat in the verses, cannot even get past first verse. The fence is fenced. The fence is strong. Hide Goat vs. Fish. Hide Goat vs. Fish. Hide Goat vs. Fish. Oh, the shame of Goat vs. Fish. Oh, the shame of the fence. Robo Hamo, no! Fence! 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 This is not pleasing to Goat vs. Fish. Two verses, all fence. Oops, all fence. Exclamation play to join Goat vs. Fish. The fence will not triumph this versus. Vacant Spirit is back in the verses for Fish. Vacant Spirit's back in the verses for Fish. Who's going to be the goat? Who's going to be the goat? Exclamation play to be the goat. Exclamation play to be the goat. Goat versus Fish, Goat versus Fish, Goat versus Fish, Goat versus Fish. Vacant Spirit is the only one in the versus Fish. Is Goat going to concede to Fish? Is this the sound of Goat conceding to Fish? Is this the sound of Goat conceding to Fish? Goat's flopping in the verses. Goat's dropping the verses. We do like this rainbowification, the stratification, all of Goat versus Fish, revealing the whole verses for all of you to see. Just how it be, just how it be. Only for Fish. Vacant Spirit, of course, we will award you a semblance of triumph should you domination this versus. And yet, without a goat, it just feels like Fish. Who will versus this Fish? Exclamation play. Exclamation play. What happened, Robo Hamo? Get back in the verses. Puckface, get back in the verses. How can Goat Bros do this to Fish? Let's try the reverse verses. Goat, what respect and deference you are showing to the Fish. So charming and nice and kind of the goat to just concede to Fish and give this versus all to Fish. Goat, we didn't know you had it in you to be so kind to the fish. You're so nice to Fish. How much you love the fish. Just giving away your verses, intentionally losing like the losers that you are. Goat losers. Loser goat. We did our best verses. Vacant Spirit, we did our best verses. The goat has let you down again. A failure of goat. A failure of goat. But Vacant Spirit, you still have to finish the verses. You still have to finish the verses. Or will it be goat versus fish? Or will it be goat versus fish? For now, it's looking like goat versus fish. For now, it's looking like goat versus fish. Nice verses. Giving the fence the slip. After all of these rollings, it's going to be goat versus fish that triumphs. No winner. No winner. Goat versus fish. Vacant Spirit. Verses beget verses. The goat was so kind to give up the verses to fish. Now the fish is so kind as to give the verses up to goat versus fish. Vacant Spirit, did you get fenced? Vacant Spirit did not even finish. It truly took goat versus fish. It truly took the power of goat versus fish to overcome the fence, Fence. Begone. Celebration. Goat versus fish has done it. Goat versus fish has done it. This versus was a triumph of goat versus fish. This versus was a triumph of goat versus fish. A triumph of goat versus fish. A triumph of goat versus fish. With tie-dye in the verses. A triumph of goat versus fish. With special musications by Tide Eye. Thank Goat versus Fish. Thank Goat versus Fish. This has been Goat versus Fish Thursday, the bonus verses. We leave you now to leave your final verses for Goat versus Fish. Your final verses for Goat versus Fish now. Go on. Goat versus Fish is here. Goat versus Fish is here. You can say what you wish to Goat versus Fish. Stupid fence. Still there. Mocking Goat versus Fish. They're all gonna laugh at you, Goat versus Fish. They're all gonna laugh at you. They're all gonna laugh at you. They're all gonna laugh at you. Goat versus Fish. Want to turn the verses back on. Who cannot join your own stream? Goat versus Fish can join our own stream. Any verses we wish. Any verses we wish. Well, we'll just have to add the verses. We'll just have to add the verses again. Appreciation for joining Goat versus Fish this Goat versus Fish Thursday. And we'll see you on the next verses. It was a triumph. A triumph for Goat versus Fish! And we'll see you on the next verses. Celebration.